Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, Donald Trump pauses foreign bribery laws. But what does that mean for the current US indictment of Indian billionaire and, of course, Narendra Modi's mate, Gautam Adani? We take a deep dive into how Hindutva is taking advantage of young minds in the United States to spread their fascist agenda. And we have brief updates on the Nijjar case, the Jagtar Singh Johal situation, and of course our daily update on the Invictus Games. All this and more on today's show. But joining me as always for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to our amazing viewers out there. Thanks for all of your beautiful comments. Please keep them coming. And don't forget to check out the other sites. And, of course, you can always support our channel through the link tree. You'll find the links there. Once again, thanks for being a part of our show. Angus, back to you.
Absolutely. And James and I together will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And of course, as usual, we'll be taking a look at loads of your great comments which have been filling up below the videos at the end of the show. So stay tuned for that. Right, James, let's get the show underway. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
We're going to start off, Angus, with a quick update on the Nijjar case. And the Nijjar case is pretty much what we expected, that it is being put over. And this time, of course, they're going to be looking at the pretrial motions as well as the pretrial conference. And essentially, that just allows them to go over evidence. They may agree to certain facts in the case, which means that the Crown prosecutor doesn't have to go through and prove that. So it saves a bit of time and streamlines the process. It also allows for any challenges or submission of witnesses. It allows the judge to give any rules or timelines on the interviewing of witnesses, as well as just looking at the overall general timeline that they anticipate the trial to take. So those are what the next steps will be. So again, that is scheduled in April, but they don't have the exact date for those. There was previously a date set for April the 23rd for certain motions, but we don't know exactly what those are, because of the fact that there is a very strict publication ban now in place on what information can be reported in the media. And we encourage people to follow those restrictions for the simple fact that it is to try and not taint any witnesses or other impacts on the case, and to ensure that the integrity of the case from start to finish is maintained. So once again, that is where we are at with the Nijjar case, and it was just a brief update. The lawyers for 3 of the accused appeared via video conference, and 1 lawyer was in person, as well as the Crown prosecutors were all in person in the courtroom as well. They didn't need the overflow room today. The crowd was a lot less in terms of the numbers of people that were there today. And again, it has shifted from the Surrey Courthouse to the New Westminster, British Columbia Courthouse. And just for that said, with the pretrial conference and all of these things that are going on in the pretrial process, just as a word of note, that the judge overseeing these portions of the case will not actually be the trial judge. So this way they can have that impartiality of any evidence or such that is not allowed is not weighing on the judge's mind. So that's a totally separate judge that'll hear the trial itself, Angus.
Yes, absolutely. And as we said yesterday, of course, there is an understandable amount of frustration and impatience from the public saying, look, come on, get on with it. We want to know what the story is. Are these men guilty? Is India involved, etc., etc.? But as we said at the time, unfortunately, you've just got to be patient. This is the due process of the law. We mustn't forget the fundamental principles of law in the West is that you are innocent until proved guilty. We've got to give these gentlemen and their legal team a chance to present their case for the defence. It's as simple as that. For all we know, they may be innocent, and that is unfortunately what we have to put up with. So absolutely, James, I think, we'll just keep following it. And a key word there, impartiality. Of course, I always contrast how the rule of law operates in the West to how it operates in India. In India, unfortunately, it does start to increasingly appear that the judiciary is becoming less and less impartial. But of course, here in the West, our judiciary, well, give or take a few flaws here and there, a few criticisms here and there, is on the whole pretty impartial. So yeah, unfortunately, we need to be patient, James.
Absolutely. And we'll continue following the trial as it progresses, of course, and keeping you updated on the events as they happen. And again, there is information coming out, but again, that can't be reported due to the publication ban. And of course, at Satledge, we always respect the court bans to ensure that we comply with the regulations and the laws. So with that said, we know about following laws and corruption, and that is taking a step backwards in the United States in the fact that Trump has now put a pause on any prosecution or investigation of the corruption and bribery of foreign officials by U.S.-based companies. Now, with his pardoning of a former U.S. congressman, of course, that also will play into whether or not it's going to be the wild, wild west in the U.S. as well when it comes to foreign companies being able to bribe, or even domestic companies being able to bribe politicians and not have the weight of the law coming down on them in terms of the Foreign Corruption Practices Act of 1977. Now, that was brought in to try and clean up all of the bribery, not only within the states, but to set a precedent worldwide that U.S. companies could not use bribery, blackmail, scandalous behavior against foreign countries to get their contracts. Now, we know that the Adani Group of India, led there by Mr. Adani, who's one of the richest men in the world, and he foresaw this in November when he had brought up the point that if Trump was to take office, or when Trump takes office, he will be able to move forward with having those charges removed. So we'll see. They're not dismissed yet. They haven't been totally set aside, but we expect that they will be in the coming days, given the fact that Trump has ordered that the Foreign Corruption Practices Act has now been suspended. He is also ordering a review of anybody who is currently facing charges, investigations, and processes in relation to foreign corruption. Now, as I said, that there has been also a U.S. citizen who is Rod R. Blagojevich, and I probably mispronounced that, but regardless, he was a Illinois politician who was the 40th governor of Illinois from 2003 to 2009. He was actually the only Illinois politician who has faced impeachment and has been forced to leave office. And he served 8 years under his corruption charges and convictions before Donald Trump had commuted his sentence in his first term. With that said, of course, now Trump has fully pardoned him, so he no longer has that record. And he was convicted for trying to sell the Senate seat of Barack Obama when Barack Obama had vacated it to take the office of the presidency of the United States. Now, it should also be known that this individual was also an appearance or a guest on The Celebrity Apprentice, of course, Donald Trump's reality show, and has other connections to Trump. So that continues on. He's a big Trump supporter, and that shouldn't be any surprise to anybody. But a part of the current Trump order is that he instructs the U.S. Attorney, Pam Bondi, to pause prosecutions under the Foreign Corruption Practices Act of 1997 until such a time as that she revises enforcement guidance that promotes American competitiveness. Now, essentially, what has come out of this is that Donald Trump is saying that, listen, the world is a corrupt place. The world is full of corrupt politicians and business people, and why should American companies not be allowed to take part in that corruption in order to secure the contracts that they desperately want to bring home? And there is, billions of dollars at risk here or that has been lost traditionally because they haven't been able to bribe or pay off these other individuals in foreign nations. And unfortunately, that now is gone. And the reason I say unfortunately is because the U.S. was a leader. They were seen as a pillar of stability and in terms of not allowing that corruption and trying to break the corruption around the world. Now they are just jumping back into the pool of corruption, allowing it, taking away the laws that govern it. And of course, with that, Gautam Adani has been charged with various infractions, as well as others with his group. And we know that there are links between Trump and Adani, as well as others in his circle, and it may open the door even further for Trump and Modi to move forward with various trade agreements or other links that potentially exist between the Adani Group and the Trump organization. Not to mention also, of course, Elon Musk. So there's a lot of concern there that there is the organization that monitors all of this through the international realm, and they claim that it's going to be detrimental to the U.S., but at the same time, the White House counters that and says that it's going to mean a lot more business for America. So that is concerning. Now, of course, we know that the U.S. Justice Department had charged the Adani Group with conspiracy to bribe Indian officials and defraud investors to the amount of over $250 million. And the charges relate to a scheme to secure contracts in relation to solar power plant projects in India. So the actual charges, as I said, were about that fraud, that corruption, and those payoffs. And that, of course, led to the Adani Group profiting billions of dollars through their false and misleading statements in the markets, as well as through the contracts in themselves. Now, who all was charged? Well, of course, the chairman of the Adani Group, Mr. Adani himself, one of his sons, Sagar Adani, that's his nephew, and he's also an executive, but he is over at the Adani Green Energy Group, and then there were several others. Now, we do expect that they will be thrown out in terms of the cases and the prosecution, so that's where that stands. Will this new policy and bout face with the U.S. benefit Mr. Gautam Adani? I think it definitely will, Angus, and I think that it's going to have far-reaching ramifications, not only between the U.S. and India, but I think around the world with the level of corruption and bribery that goes on every day.
Yeah, I find this a very difficult story because there are pros and cons, and it's very easy to see on the face of it, take a knee-jerk reaction saying this is outrageous, this is endorsing corruption. In reality, it's a lot more nuanced and it's a lot more complex than that situation. Yes, the downside by the looks of his actions are that people like Gautam Adani might get away with an awful lot. That in itself is a definite negative of this move. But it's a difficult one, this, and I'll give you some examples. Many years ago, I worked in the oil industry and I operated in Nigeria for several years. And there were a lot of US companies, large US companies operating in Nigeria at the time. I actually worked for a US company operating in the oil industry in Nigeria at the time. Nigeria is, or certainly was back then, I suspect still is the case, one of the most corrupt countries on the planet. You cannot operate in Nigeria, or certainly in those days, I'm going back to maybe about 15, 20 years ago. You could not operate in Nigeria. Literally, you just couldn't operate without being corrupt, without paying bribes to local officials for anything. Nothing could move, nothing could happen. No certificates, no regulatory authority to do anything would be granted without a backhander. It was just the way business was done in Nigeria. Literally, it was as blatant as that. And by way of example, to operate a boat at the time, as I was doing at the time, to operate a boat to leave Nigeria and come back in again, leave Nigerian waters and come back in again, you had to pay a bribe. Now, I didn't know that was a bribe. I thought it was a standard certificate that you needed to get. So I'd spent years saying, I need to pay this certificate. Somebody once told me, no, you don't realise that's not a regulation. It's a bribe, which came as a bit of a shock. But that is how business was done in Nigeria. Now, the reason that US companies operated successfully in Nigeria was because they managed to avoid this FCPA regulation. There were ways of doing it, and the way we did it, and I've got to be very careful what I say here, the company I worked for at the time operated a local company as well, and we had a legal fire break, essentially a legal gap between how we operated in Nigeria and our parent company in the US. So it meant that all our practices in Nigeria that were necessary to operate in Nigeria were legally removed. There was a break between us and America so that the FCPA couldn't then catch us. A company that worked alongside us, a company called Wilbros, a very well-known construction company at the time, they were caught, unfortunately, by the FCPA. They were fined $32 million at the time for essentially operating like everybody else did, but they didn't have a legal fire break between themselves and the US parent, which meant that the US government got hold of them. I think 2 of their executives were sent to prison for a year or so. They were fined $32 million, and that was it. But and this is coming back to your article, James, what's interesting, it is impossible in a corrupt world for US companies to operate in certain parts of the world and be commercially competitive without essentially acting in the same way that everybody else does. That's paying these corrupt bribes or facilitating, let's say, things with payments. It's just the way the world works. It's wrong. We all know it's legally and morally wrong. We know it is totally, it undermines the rule of law. It undermines the normal morality of commerce. Unfortunately, this is the reality. This is how the world works in certain parts of the world. So what Donald Trump is doing, and this is the pure and utter businessman in Donald Trump, he is saying, look, we can't compete on the world stage in these corrupt places where other companies, other countries are making billions of dollars. We're losing out because we are the only people operating under the rule of law. Therefore, I'm a businessman. I'm a deal maker. I'm going to remove this. Let's just level the playing field. Let's do what everybody else does. So I stand for United States interests. I stand for United States business. We will succeed. We will basically make more money doing this. That is what it's all about. That is the upside. The downside, as you rightly say, James, is that people like Gautam Adani are going to get away with corruption. That is the bad side. What is right and wrong? I don't know. I don't think there is a right and wrong unless you stand totally and utterly black and white on the rule of law. But unfortunately, you cannot operate in places like Nigeria or to a limited degree Angola and these other places, certainly West Africa, but it's certainly in other parts of the world. You cannot operate as a company unless you make facilitation payments or bribes, let's call them what they are, unless you pay bribes to the right people to make things happen. Otherwise, obstacles are put in your way and you cannot compete and you cannot succeed. That, unfortunately, James, is the harsh reality of global commerce.
It is, and one that we'll watch and see how it plays out and what impact it's going to have in the U.S. On U.S. soil. We'll have to watch as well, as I said, with them looking to pardon certain individuals and friends of Trump. But at the end of the day, you're absolutely right, Angus. It's tough to compete in a world of corruption in places like Nigeria and so many other locations. So it's a delicate balancing act, we'll say. And on that note of delicate balancing acts, of course, we know that the athletes that are balancing the reality of life-altering injuries along with athleticism and, of course, their families. Now we go back to a report on the Invictus Games and a doctor from Canada who is leading up the medical team that's handling the games this year.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Paul Dillon. I'm a 10-year veteran of the Canadian Armed Forces, still serving as a reservist with 39 Canadian Brigade Group and 1112 Field Ambulance. Outside of my military work, I've worked for over 10 years as a family physician and emergency physician all across Canada. Unfortunately, I can't be there with you today. I'm traveling with my family in Ireland, where I completed med school at the Royal College of Surgeons. As Chief Medical Officer, my number one goal is to ensure the safety and security of friends and family, competitors, and spectators across all the venues in Vancouver and Whistler. That is something that's close to my heart. I have an incredible team. That makes me so excited to be a part of this, to support the competitors day in and day out at the games. We have over 200 volunteers, an incredible group of specialists who are ready on the phone to give us support when we need, and are on the ground first responders. I've personally visited all of the sites. I've looked at our security protocols, our safety protocols, and we've really built multiple layers of medical safety to allow the competitors to safely compete. I'm confident that we've developed our safety procedures to allow them to safely participate and succeed.
Welcome to another update on the Invictus Games in Vancouver and Whistler, British Columbia. Now, we have been focusing on the sports and the athletes throughout the past week, and it has been much excitement happening at all of the venues. But something that has been not discussed by us here was the fact that the head medical doctor for the Invictus Games 2025 is actually Dr. Paul Dillon. He is a rural physician in Sechelt, British Columbia, and a very proud Sikh. After completing his residency in Regina, Saskatchewan, he worked as a rural locum across Saskatchewan and the Northwest Territories before settling back in British Columbia. For those unsure what a locum is, it is someone who travels around, in this case a doctor that fills in for other doctors, whether they're on vacation or for other reasons. He completed further training in disaster medicine, tropical medicine, and enjoys working as a reservist medical officer with the 12 Vancouver Field Ambulance. He is a major in the Canadian Forces. He was the editor of The Surprising Lives of Small Town Doctors and co-founder of the Review course in Family Medicine. He is honored to be a part of the Invictus team and to ensure safety and care for all of the athletes. Although he was unable to attend the games in person this year, he has been an instrumental part in ensuring the planning and all of the strategies that are in place to protect and care for the athletes and others, that he was instrumental in the planning process and should be recognized as such. Now, Major Paul Dillon has done various media articles, and I'm going to just read off one here from Connie Jordson of the Coast Reporter newspaper that was done in September of 2024. It states here that an incredible honor and great challenge. That's how Sechelt-based family doctor Paul Dillon sums up his appointment to the top position with the medical team of the 7th Invictus Games to be held in Vancouver and Whistler from February the 8th to the 16th of 2025. Now, of course, we know that there is not a large presence from India this year, but it should be noted that they are actually increasing their presence at the Invictus Games, and although we don't see them here at the Vancouver events, we do expect to see athletes from India back in the future events. Now, Dr. Paul Dillon's appointment to the staff of the Games, in which wounded, injured, and sick service members and veterans compete in a range of athletic events, was announced via press release on September the 6th. In that statement, Chief Operating Officer of the Games, Robin McVicker, said that Dillon, who is a Canadian Armed Forces Reserve Major, was chosen for his incomparable experience and leadership. In McVicker's view, competitors, their family and friends, the workforce, and attending supporters are all in the best hands with Dr. Dillon's oversight and the planning and delivery of medical support at the Games. He also said that he's looking forward to bringing together all of the different aspects of his medical, professional, and military experiences to ensure that the participants from all over the world have an incredible experience here in our home province. There are going to be up to 550 competitors from up to 25 nations attending the Games, Dillon told the Coast Reporter. It's a very unique medical audience, and the complexities and challenges of having both mental and physical disabilities that the competitors have overcome, overlaid with the challenge of winter sports and competing in multiple sports while wearing your nation's flag, make this an incredibly unique experience. He said the medical team's goal will be to ensure the competitors are able to compete at the highest level they can. For his group, it is Dillon's opinion that a good medal performance is to deliver on the Games' medical support requirements so that competitors can laser focus on their sports and their path to recovery, along with their families and friends, and all participants can enjoy the Games knowing that the medical team is there if needed. 2025 will mark the first Invictus Games where winter sports are introduced. Competitions scheduled to be part of this year's events include alpine skiing and snowboarding, Nordic skiing, biathlon, skeleton and wheelchair curling, as well as core Invictus sports of indoor rowing, sitting volleyball, swimming, wheelchair rugby, and wheelchair basketball. Also, don't forget that that has seen several awards already handed out, the gold, silver, and bronze medals in various sports. The games support the recovery and rehabilitation of international wounded, injured, and sick service personnel and veterans through sport. The Invictus Games Foundation was established following the success of the first Invictus Games in London in 2014, with the aim of spreading the Invictus spirit worldwide. The foundation governs the delivery of the Invictus Games, runs an online community, We Are Invictus, and provides year-round sports, recovery, and adventurous challenge opportunities beyond the Games across 23 nations. Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, is patron of the Invictus Games Foundation and founder of the Invictus Games, and is reported to be scheduled to attend the 2025 edition, which we all know he has been here in very public, both himself and the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle. During his assignment, during the Games, I'll be 100% committed to ensuring top-notch medical care is being provided. In the past, I have met Prince Edward when he was awarded the Duke of Edinburgh's Award in Vancouver many years ago, Dylan said. So celebrity sighting is definitely a lower priority for Dr. Dylan. Now, the Invictus Games also had an introduction to Major Paul Dillon and Dr. Dillon on their website, which you can always view. And this goes on to say that the Invictus Games Vancouver Whistler 2025, presented by ATCO and Boeing, today named Major Paul Dillon as Chief Medical Officer for the Games. Major Dillon brings a wealth of diverse experience and strong military background, lending his considerable skills and experience to ensuring the health and safety of all participants, and particularly of the up to 550 competitors, wounded, injured, and sick service members and veterans. So a lot of this story actually is repetitive from the previous, so I think it was a shared release in which some of this information was derived in the first story, so I won't go ahead and repeat it all. But I think that it is important to bring up also that in 2014, he joined the military in Regina, Saskatchewan with the 16th Field Ambulance and served as 39 Brigade Surgeon. In 2021-2022, he completed his flight surgeon qualifications and his MBA at the Royal Military College. His civilian medical practice includes emergency room and rural family medicine, as well as national family medicine-related teaching engagements. He stated that as I reach 10 years as a Canadian Armed Forces reservist, I'm awed and humbled to offer world-leading medical support, both mentally and physically, to the Invictus Games competitors as they continue their recovering journey through the Games in 2025. A gold medal performance to fully deliver on the Games' medical support requirements so that competitors can laser focus on the long path to recovery, along with their families, friends, and all participants, as stated earlier. So something else that I found as I was researching this story and researching Dr. Dillon is that, of course, we have touched on the fact that he is a practicing Sikh. And this I found interesting was that his crest is actually up on the Governor General website in Canada. And this is interesting because I'm going to show this, show the coat of arms, because it has very big significance and representation of the Sikh community and himself, his wife, and his roots in both the Sikh community, but also from Ireland and Canada. So it's very cool to see the combination of all of this into one. But what I did find very interesting was that in terms of the symbolism, the white and green are colors associated with India and Ireland, commemorating the cultural origins of Dr. Dillon and his wife Sarah. The central white portion alludes to the path ascribed by Sikhism, Dr. Dillon's faith towards finding ultimate truth and enlightenment. It also represents his journey to Ireland, which allowed him to fulfill both his professional and personal dreams. The black in the top of the shield refers to the Gaelic name for Dublin, meaning Black Pool. The pattern was inspired by the Book of Kells, the most famous Irish illuminated manuscript, which is kept in Dublin. The circles represent wheels and thus Dr. Dillon's membership in Rotary International, highlighting the importance of volunteer work in Sikhism. Linked to other shapes, they indicate the profound effect of voluntary work on the community at large. They also represent Dr. Dillon's 2 children, while the central rectangle symbolizes his marriage and the core family bond. So I thought I would share that because I thought that was very interesting. I thought it was very inspiring, and it just goes to show that there is a high respect for Dr. Dillon in Canada and in the international community. Now, in terms of the symbolism, the lion and the khanda sword honor Dr. Dillon's Sikh ancestry. The sword further refers to the military service of his grandfather in the Indian Army. The lion alludes to the name Singh, which means lion in Sanskrit. Its color, which can be described as saffron or orange, represents the 3rd color of the flag of India and Ireland, and the Sunshine Coast. So again, hats off to Dr. Paul Dillon and all of the others involved in the Invictus Games this year. Congratulations to all of the participants, those who have won medals and those who have just shown up to show their courage, their dedication, and their perseverance in performing and participating in the games this year. Thanks for tuning in on this report, and make sure to watch again tomorrow night as we bring more medal updates and information on other athletes. Thank you very much for watching, and stay safe, everyone. So as you can see, it's the India government or the India athletes weren't well represented this year at the games. I'm not sure why that is, because I know there has been an increase of involvement over the past several games prior to this one from India and their military service members. So regardless though, I think that Dr. Paul Dillon and his family really has brought home the significance of the Sikh involvement, not only here in Canada, but their dedication to community around the world in welcoming all these athletes. Once again, he was not able to be here in person for the games themselves because he is in Ireland on vacation with his family. But we know that he's here in spirit, and all of the work that he's done over the last year or so with his team to make sure that that the games go without any real complications, because they prepared so well for it, Angus.
Indeed, absolutely. Another inspirational report. And I did look at that snow in envy, thinking how fabulous the snow conditions look for the skiing events in Whistler. I mean, absolutely awesome. I think it's one of the best powder skiing places in the Rockies, I gather. But an inspiring story, and it just shows that Sikhs have achieved so much. They do find themselves in the most incredible positions. They're always there, and always those Sikh principles always at the forefront. It really is not just a way of life. It forms the very foundations of so many people's lives, their philosophies, their outlook on life. Again, it's all about seva, selfless service, and it just always astounds me how selfless service is just so ingrained in every Sikh, just clearly from birth. It is so That's ingrained right. in their whole mindset, their whole attitude, their whole motivation towards life, and it comes out, it manifests itself in so many wonderful areas. Whether we talk about the recent appointment to the Senate, whether it's this Dr. Dillon, wherever it happens to be, there are so many Sikhs in public service and in just general service to society. I think it's just such a great and powerful and positive reflection on what Sikhi stands and represents, and that of course is in itself an embodiment of what the whole concept of Khalistan will be about. I think that is really why we are such supporters of Khalistan, because these principles that are actually practiced for real, these aren't just for show. These are actually genuinely ingrained in every Sikh's day-to-day life. These are what Khalistan will embody. So yeah, James, I think again, just such a positive message coming from the Invictus Games, and this time perfectly embodied and personified in this Sikh Doctor.
That's right. Yeah, it's quite inspiring, and he's actually on the Sunshine Coast, just a very small rural community on the island there. So, yeah, or on across where you got to take a ferry. It's actually on the mainland that circles around. So, small community, but he is having a major impact.
Indeed, fantastic to see. Okay, James, let's move across the Atlantic then to a quick update here in the UK on the Jaggi story. Yes, the Jaggi story unfolds. We reported yesterday how he spent his 8th birthday behind bars. Well, his 38th birthday, but the 8th actual birthday behind bars itself. His MP, Douglas McAllister, did stand up this week in Parliament again, asking the government, the ruling Labour Party, saying, look, what are you doing about it? You must be demanding his immediate release. We did hear over the last couple of days that the judge finally closed protracted prosecution evidence, or the call for evidence from the prosecution. It's taken 147 hearings, yes, 147 hearings to get to this point, but his defence statement was at last taken, again after 147 hearings, but it couldn't be signed as it got left in jail by court officers. Apparently some ridiculous situation. I think that was probably more out of incompetence than actual deliberate mistake, but ultimately it doesn't matter. The whole process has been so protracted that he still remains behind bars for over 7 years. It's an absolute outrage, as we say on a regular basis. I just wanted to highlight the fact that there is a petition that's been launched just a couple of weeks ago. This is another petition launched by Devinderjit Singh. This is Devinderjit works he's a principal advisor to the Sikh Press Association, and he's been a very active campaigner for all Sikh issues, and particularly for the freeing Jagtar Singh Johal, particularly pushing the government, the current Starmer government, for this promised investigation into the events of 1984, and of course other key issues affecting the Sikh community, amongst which includes transnational oppression. He actually launched a petition. He's launched a few petitions recently, but this latest one is to secure the actual release of Jaggi and the return of other British nationals arbitrarily detained in India. And the petition reads, there are British nationals being arbitrarily detained without conviction in Indian jails for many years, with many concerns about their treatment. And of course, we do know that Jaggi has been tortured, literally tortured by Indian authorities. Again, in a modern democratic nation, it's just an absolute outrage. And his petition continues to say that we believe the UK government must secure the release of all British nationals that are arbitrarily detained and return them to the UK. And he calls for the release and return to the UK of these individuals, especially where there are human rights concerns. We are concerned about targeting of Sikhs, both in India, and reports of transnational oppression in the diaspora. So if you are a UK resident, please do have a look at that petition. I'll put the link in the description below. Please sign this petition. Every signature matters, every signature counts. There is another petition running as well about other Sikh issues which were reported on in the past. I'll keep that link in the description below as well, so please also sign that. It takes people power. The politicians will only react. They'll always take the path of least resistance, and that path of least resistance will come if there is enough public pressure, giving them a hard time about it. Keep hammering them, keep pressuring them until they say, oh God, you know what, it's easier just to relent and do something about it. So keep that pressure on, get that petition signed. So James, unfortunately, once again, we have to highlight this case of Jaggi, this outrage against the standard rule of law.
Absolutely, Angus. And just to remind our viewers how important it is to speak your voice and to sign the petition, is that it could very well be you or someone you love who goes to India and just has a social media post that offends the Narendra Modi government or the RAW agency or RSS, and boom, all of a sudden they're locked up arbitrarily with no trial, with hundreds of appearances, with no progress made, and a government at home that sits on their hands and does not really force the issue to get you back home and get you repatriated to where you belong. So again, just keep in mind that this has far-reaching implications for the safety, security, and sovereignty of foreign nationals.
Indeed, and I think that's a very important point. Is all of us must stand up for anybody who is oppressed, because for now they come for them, but one day they could come for you, and who will speak up for you? That's what you always must keep in mind. So a very important lesson that we learnt from the Second World War. Okay, James, I just want to move on to my second story. This is really my main story, and this is a fascinating article. It's being spread around social media at the moment because it has actually really hit a nerve, particularly in the Sikh diaspora. It's an article that appeared in the BAFLA, on the BAFLA website. And it was an article written by Nevin Kalipali, actually about a month and a half ago. It's been around for a few weeks, but it's really just the mainstream social media has discovered it and spreading it around. And it is actually it's a brilliant essay looking at how Hindutva has been spreading this Hindu supremacist propaganda, not just as we know across social media and just generally in the mainstream media, but most importantly, it's been deliberately targeting our academic institutions, our universities, our colleges, and it's been again deliberately targeted to influence the youth, the young generation, and it's taking advantage of something that we've all noticed very much in the West, that the young are very much, and I think this is part of this sort of almost liberal left-leaning agenda. The young have really taken on board this whole tolerance, this whole broadening of the mind sort of mindset. In other words, they've jumped on a lot of a lot of bandwagons. But this whole different mindset that actually it does create quite a generation gap between the young and certainly older generations, which is becoming increasingly wide, I have to say, this gap. But the Hindutva have realised that this young generation, of course, like most young generations, are very influenceable. It's very easy to influence them with an agenda. And they've realised, they can get into these academic institutions and take advantage of this mindset to start introducing and infiltrating the young with this Hindutva mindset, trying to spread essentially this Hindu supremacist agenda. And this article has analysed this in great detail. It is a very lengthy article, so I'll only just go through little bits of it and just bring out the highlights of it. But it's a supremely written, very well researched article, and actually argues a very, very powerful case, providing all the evidence to support this idea that the Hindu fascist agenda, let's call it for what it is being spread and is influencing the young generation, particularly in the United States. And what this article says is, during the long summer between the crackdowns on pro-Palestine demonstrations on college campuses and the start of the fall semester, that's autumn, an organisation called Hindu on Campus, or HOC, has managed to stay busy. Now, HOC is yet another one of these RSS fronts. It is yet another Hindutva front. Dedicated, it calls itself, to safeguarding Sanatana Hindu Dharma on college campuses, HOC is an internet affinity group that uses social media to promote other well-established Hindu organisations while churning out a robust feed of content aimed toward a Gen Z audience. Over the summer, they promoted content related to everything from Hindu Persecution Awareness Month to Kamala Harris's presidential run, but the bulk of the content focuses on geopolitics and South Asia. Now, last year, they zeroed in on an attack in Jammu in Kashmir, in which the unidentified militants killed 9 Hindu pilgrims. And more recently, the popular uprising in Bangladesh, of course, we reported on that at the time, when Sheikh Hasina was forcibly ejected from Bangladesh, and the India-allied Awami League party. Now, of course, Sheikh Hasina was essentially put into place by the Awami League. She represented the Awami League. The Awami League has strong ties to Narendra Modi. Now, HOC dubbed the popular anti-corruption movement the Bangladeshi Hindu genocide. And this is something that we actually reported a lot on, saying at the time, look, the Hindu majority, the Hindutva RSS promoted right wing in India, jumped on what was happening in Bangladesh. They accused Bangladesh Muslims of perpetrating a genocide against the Hindu minority. And they said, the Hindu minority in Bangladesh must rise up, they must arm themselves against this genocide. And we at the time said, well, look, all you're doing is this is pure hypocrisy. This is what you did in Punjab in the 1980s and 1990s. You persecuted, you genocided the Sikh population, the minority in Punjab at the time. And yet you call them terrorists when they rose up. So again, we highlighted that democracy. But here again, the HOC is perpetuating this talk about a genocide, this Hindu genocide in Bangladesh. And they actually, at the time, they showed a map and timeline of Bangladesh spanning from 3000 BC to the present. And over the course of 5,000 years, this map that they use as propaganda to support this idea, that it turned from a Hindu red to an Islamic green, indicating the religious shift of the region. But actually the truth was far more nuanced. The truth wasn't this. Again, it's just all about how they've created, essentially it's misinformation. They've created this propaganda that they are now using amongst the campuses, amongst the young, to say, look how the scourge of Islam has been driving out the Hindus, from example, from Bangladesh. It's not true, but that is what the propaganda they're perpetuating. This also aligns with this common theme in right-wing Hindu supremacist ideology, that Islam is their greatest threat, particularly in India. Now, they say that Hindu on campus, HOC, represents a new generation of Hindu supremacist extremism in the diaspora. Now, the argument advanced by infographics that HOC perpetuate is that Hindus should have the right to self-determination in the form of an ethno-state, providing a pseudo-historical justification for the Hindu right-wing's openly fascist aspirations in India. Interesting, actually, this parallel. We talk about self-determination, that the Hindu supremacists are arguing that they have this right to self-determination. Well, interestingly, that is that same right to self-determination that they are denying Sikhs for Khalistan. Again, this hypocrisy, but this is what they're pushing. Hindu organisations in the diaspora play a pivotal role in lobbying and fundraising on behalf of the BJP interests, and of course by that read RSS and Brahmanical control of India. Yes, how often have we reported that these organisations, these fronts, whether it's the HOC or all these other RSS fronts that operate right across North America and indeed here in Europe as well, they are pushing this same RSS agenda. Now, HOC, established only 4 years ago, represents this new generation of supremacist extremism that's spreading across the diaspora. They use these infographics and ethno-nationalist talking points laundered through the language of social justice. Now, this is where, what I was talking at the beginning, this is where they're leveraging this new young mindset, these what they call these social justice warriors who's standing up for the latest, greatest craze, whether it's BLM, whether it's Palestine, the persecution of Palestinians. There are these bandwagons that these social justice warriors are jumping on. These are the young. Of course, the young are motivated. They need a cause to feel strongly about. They need a cause to fly flags about, to take to the streets about. That's what drives the young. It's a very noble thing, but unfortunately, it's being taken advantage of by these sorts of agendas. And by that, I'm looking at BLM, whether it's Palestine, whatever it is. But the Hindu supremacists are realizing this whole young army are here, angry, ready to take to the streets. All they need is a cause to fight for. Well, this is what HOC and the RSS are providing. Here's a great cause to fight for. And so they're feeding this young generation with this propaganda so that they can then get angry about it. They can take to the streets. They can push this agenda. They become, let's call them these useful idiots. They become this proxy army to push this RSS agenda. So that's what it's all about, leveraging this social justice motivation of the young. Now, the construction of Hindus as victims of history is part and parcel of this broader Hindutva lobby's concerted, well-funded effort to exert influence on the American political machine. Now, one of the ideological campaigns embraced by Hindutva organisations in the diaspora has been upholding, of course, the caste system, particularly in Silicon Valley. We've suffered from this. Our demonetisation has come from caste-influenced, Brahmanical, upper-caste people in Silicon Valley who control Google, control YouTube. They don't like anybody calling out the caste system, calling out India, calling out Brahmanical control. That is why we, for example, have been demonetised. California, for example, we do know that was on the cusp. They almost criminalised caste discrimination in the workplace, but it was stopped. Governor Gavin Newsom stopped it under pressure from local Hindutva groups. He vetoed the bill as a result of Hindutva pressure. So the caste system remains in place even in the diaspora. And of course, this creation, this fabrication of Hindu phobia, it's making in this public perception that Hindus are victims. They are victims of something they call Hindu phobia. Well, Hindu phobia, as far as we've seen, doesn't really exist. There is an angry response to Hindu supremacist right-wing extremism. That's not Hindu phobia. But they are painting themselves as some sort of victim. Again, this is utilising this social justice mindset. It's trying to motivate the young. So saying, look at these poor Hindus, they are the subject of persecution. Absolutely not the truth, but this is how they are motivating the young. With the emergence of the Gaza solidarity movement among college students, many campus organisers have been very vocal about the structural similarities between the occupations of Palestine and Kashmir in India. Kashmiri liberation movements, like their Palestinian counterparts, have been smeared endlessly by HOC and their social media accounts. They've been painted as violent extremists. Well, here we go again. I mean, we've heard this before. We do know, of course, anybody who stands up for khalistan apparently is a violent extremist. Likewise, those calling for just basic human rights in Kashmir, basic freedoms, democratic freedoms in Kashmir, likewise are being painted as violent extremists. Yes, we do know there is militancy coming in over the border from Pakistan, but anybody, even local peaceful democratic politicians who've been house arrested every time, for example, the anniversary of 2019 occupation turns around, they are placed under house arrest. They're not violent extremists, they are political campaigners standing up for their basic human rights. But anyway, so for the RSS, India's commitment to secularism following its independence was a major obstacle to re-establishing what they believed was India's ultimately Hindu destiny, this Hindu Rashtra. So ironically, the Indian constitution, which is based on secularism, actually stood in the way of a Hindu Rashtra because, of course, by saying, look, no, all religions should be treated as equal, what the Hindu supremacists are arguing, saying, no, we are a Hindu nation, we are a majority Hindu nation, therefore India should be a Hindu state, it should be a Hindu Rashtra at the expense of all the other religious minorities. Now, of course, under Modi's reign, the RSS has exercised considerable influence. They've had a particularly profound effect on the writing of textbooks. Yes, they've controlled the narrative, and of course they've controlled the media. They've helped shape a version of history that is promoted by HOC and similar organisations. Increasingly in Hindu scholastic circles, the caste system is dismissed as an invention of the British, and Hindu supremacy reframed as a legitimate anti-colonial movement. Now, the hypocrisy and the irony of this very mindset is absolutely mind-blowing. They claim the British created the caste system, despite the fact the caste system has existed for nearly 2,000 years. Again, this is reframing, this is misinformation, this is reframing, rewriting history. The British did not create the caste system. It's been embedded in Hinduism for 2,000 years. That's why it's so powerful. That's why it's so hard to remove. And they're also saying that Hindu supremacy is a legitimate anti-colonial movement. Well, the irony again, India is a colonial control of what is geographically India. It's the colonial control of the Kashmiri Muslims, the colonial control of the Punjabi, the Khalistani Sikhs, the control of East India, Bengal, Manipur, these areas, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, all these other areas that are essentially, that were colonially controlled by the British, and that colonial control was handed over to the Brahmins, the upper caste. So the Brahmins, have a colonial control of India. So again, this hypocrisy runs so deep. According to another infographic that is spread across social media by HOC, caste is a racist, colonial, classist construct that was imposed on the indigenous Hindu populations during the colonial rule of India. Again, this outrageous misinformation. HAF, that's another RSS organisation, has targeted academic conferences, platformed right-wing voices that belittle anti-caste discourse as critical caste theory. Now, what can be observed is how HOC repackages and advances a laundered version of India's history to reach Hindus raised in the United States. It's misinformation, in other words. It's misinformation spread to the diaspora. HOC's co-option of anti-racist language is perfectly suited for the college-aged audience. In other words, it's targeting the young because it knows the young can be easily influenced by this agenda. Well-meaning social media users who post in solidarity with decolonial struggle, racial equality, or other identity-based advocacy campaigns not be moved to support HOC if they're led to believe that Hindus comprise an indigenous people under constant threat. Again, it's all about painting Hindus as victims. HAC is a wolf in sheep's clothing. When young Hindus confront how their own lineages are structured by religious fascism, it can be a real reckoning. Many join the ranks to the left to recognise the interconnectedness of Hindu ethno-nationalism with other totalitarian movements, potentially to the dismay of their own families. It's a very powerful piece. There's an awful lot. It's a very academic piece. There's a lot of big academic language in here, but it is a really interesting read. I urge anybody, if you've got the time, read this piece in detail. It actually sets out how the RSS has influenced the young agenda, how it's really taken advantage of the young, as I say, these social justice warriors who are so keen, who are so motivated to fight for noble causes, to fight for just causes. They are now being influenced by the RSS to fight for a cause that is not noble, that is not just. It is in fact a totalitarian fascist cause. It is a cause that is far from nobility. But the young, particularly in the diaspora, are joining this cause in a mistaken belief that they're fighting for something they think is worth fighting for. It is far from that. It is not a noble cause worth fighting for. This is why the young must be educated that this is misinformation. It is an agenda coming from India. It is once again the evil, the powerful evil of the RSS, the Hindutva, that they are controlling so many minds across the diaspora. We need to keep pointing this out, James. It is in our remit to tell the young you mustn't believe everything that you read. You must always check everything that you are fed. These so-called facts, these infographics you see on social media, for example, quite often come from an evil agenda, an agenda that is so far removed from social justice. This is why they need to be much more critical in their thinking. They need to look at alternative narratives. They need to watch programs like us, James. It is up to us to ensure that the truth is sent out there, that people are not so deeply influenced by the RSS, James.
Absolutely, Angus. And of course, you mentioned the fact or the importance of actually getting educated as an activist, as an individual, as a social media warrior, so to speak. And it just goes to show how easily the manipulation can happen, because if you look at the LGBTQ movement in the US, in Canada, and elsewhere, now that is supposed to be all about inclusivity, all about acceptance, all about bringing people together in one as one group. And yet at the same time, several years ago, the LGBTQ movement banned the police officers in uniform or out of uniform from participating in the pride parades at the behest and the orders or the request of the BLM movement, the Black Lives Matter movement. So it just shows how the agenda that's supposed to be inclusivity and bringing people together can actually be used and manipulated by others just to fill out their own agenda. And that's what we're seeing here, is that the University of Hindutva is using their voice, their soapbox, to try to cause divide under the guise of saying that it is something good.
Absolutely right. There is basically a young global army, an army of young men and women who are motivated to change the world. That is what you're like when you're 18, 19, 20 years old. You want to change the world. And how easy it is that so many good causes can very easily be hijacked by evil causes to then use this army to further their own evil cause. So yeah, this is it's a very interesting article, this, a very powerful article. I do urge our audience, if you've got time, dig it out, have a look at it and read through it, and spread the word. That's what it's all about. It's just spreading the truth and making the young aware of how easily they can be misinfluenced, I would say. Right, James, let us move on now to our comments section. Loads of comments in, as always. Thank you, as always, to our wonderful audience, our really great, loyal audience who keep filling our comment sections with some fascinating comments and loads of supportive comments as well. Thank you again to each and every one of our commenters, new commenters and indeed our regulars. So 1S1N2, one of our regulars, says, "Hi guys." Now this comes back to the games, James. 1S1N2 says, "The second Guru Angad Dev Ji, taught an encourage sports like wrestling and held competitions. Absolutely, and indeed, this is why I think I said at the time a few days ago, martial arts and sports gatherings are so important a part of Sikh society. Sport does take such an important role. Hit fitness, well-being, it's ingrained again into Sikh principles, and I think this, as you rightly say, comes from the second Guru Angad Dev Ji. And Manjot Singh Khalsa chips in and says, also Guru Angad Dev Ji Maharaj's langar served meat at that time. Even today there are some Gurdwaras that still do it. So yeah, James, I think as we said, it's so ingrained in Sikhi principles, it actually stems back to one of the gurus who says it is absolutely vital that sports, and I think this is linked to military prowess as well, that sports must be encouraged amongst the community.
And it's shown so much through the Invictus Games, through the Olympics, through so many other areas of the world in international competition, that the Sikh community is always there and in front. Although we don't see a big presence of them on the athletic fields this year, we do see them volunteering, helping with the games. We see Dr. Dylan. We see so many others. So whether it's on the ice of one of the sports or whether it's behind the scenes, they still have a major impact around the world and great leadership.
Indeed, yeah, and of course it always comes back to basic practical reasons. The reason that the second Guru promoted this was in terms of your literal physical survival as a society. Your army has to be fit to fight, and that's really where it stems from. So that's why fitness is such an important part of Sikhi principles, which has of course evolved in today's more peaceful world into just fitness in sports. So yeah, fascinating to see that.
That's right.
Knockdown. This is an interesting comment because it does actually reflect an irony. We often get critics saying, look, why are all the Khalistanis not living in Khalistan or Punjab? You're all out in the diaspora. Why are you out in the diaspora? If Punjab is so great, why are you out in the diaspora? Well, Knockdown says, well, why is the pro-India population in the West, if India is such a good country, why do they leave India in the first place? Absolutely right. And I think that is an argument we can turn back because, in fact, the Indian diaspora, the non-Sikh Indian diaspora, far outweighs the Sikh diaspora. So the argument is that, well, if India is such a wonderful democratic rule of law nation, why are so many Indians leaving India? I think that's an absolutely valid point, James.
Absolutely. Take a look at modern politics in the U.S. Some people that, when President Biden came in, they left the U.S. because they didn't agree with his politics or how things were run. People have left because of Trump. They don't like the way his policies and things are going. But at the end of the day, that is the homeland for the Americans, and they want their nation to be great. They want to move forward. They want to celebrate the goodness and remove the bad things of the nation. Now, unfortunately, in India, you don't have the freedom to speak out publicly like you do in the Western world. So this is their nation. This is their home country. This represents their culture, their history, and everything that's good about it. But they left because of the bad and the oppression, and they want the opportunity to have a great nation once again and to return home and celebrate.
Absolutely. In reality, they're just leaving for a better life, which implies by extension that India is not giving them a good enough life. So, India is failing in many parts, and again, another reason for the Sikhs to argue for their own nation of Khalistan. Talking of Khalistan Jat says Sikhs and Jews have the same situation, but Sikhs are very strong now globally compared to 50 years ago. Yeah, I've often drawn this parallel actually between the establishment of Israel and how powerful Israel has become as a nation. And likewise, I think there is a parallel to Sikhs in the Punjab and Khalistan. I think the establishment of Khalistan would become a disproportionately powerful nation. And actually, of course, like Israel is so deeply motivated by the Jewish population, or should I say a Jewish population that are so deeply motivated by their religion, by their self-survival, etc. And it's made the nation of Israel such a powerful player on the world stage. And I think Khalistan reflects much of that same mindset. I think Khalistan, because it will be it will be occupied by so many motivated Sikhs who, again, they live the principles of their religion. I think that is why Khalistan will be such a powerful nation. And like Israel, I believe, I have no doubt, it will be deeply supported by the West, by Western democracies, particularly the United States. It will be resourced both financially, militarily, everything like Israel is. It will also likewise be supported by the United States and other Western nations, because it will stand as a basic, not just a strategic location, a strategic stepping stone in the region, but also it stands as a democratic beacon in an area surrounded by very undemocratic nations, James.
Absolutely, Angus, and I think that's what it's all about is, looking at the comparisons, but at the same time, there have been a lot of horrible atrocities that have been perpetrated against both of those groups. So let's hope that we can move forward in a positive way.
Absolutely. And talking about atrocities, Sam Singh says, look, radical Islam and Hindu radicals are pretty much the same. Yeah, and this actually does highlight the point. It's extremism. We, and like the Sikh community, have nothing against any other religion. But what we do have against is extremism, injustice, unfairness, and extremism. Violence in any form, extremism is what we stand against, whether it's left-wing, whether it's right-wing, religious extremism. And extremism, unfortunately, exists in all religions, or pretty much most religions. Certainly we have Christian extremists. We reported about that actually recently in the Punjab. That's what Amritpal Singh was standing up against, as it turned out, against Christian extremists. We have Islamic extremists who are operating in J&K, for example, but also around the world. But of course, we do have Hindu extremists. That is what we're all fighting against. United, we stand against extremism. That is what we're fighting against, James. Simple as that.
Absolutely. And let's face it, even within the Sikh religion, there are extremists there as well. So we're not saying that one is any better than the other when it comes to the extremists. That is the problem, is the extremism that's taking place in all different religions and all different groups, whether it's political or whatever. It's about the extremism, trying to quiet that down and bring the reality and acceptance forward.
Yeah, and the next comment, I love this comment from Gina or Gina 5167. Sikhs have always helped the GDP of every country they've migrated to. Hardly criminals. Indians are hard workers, especially Sikhs. It's a well-known fact. And who doesn't launder money? I'm not saying it's right. Well, I think the key point here, Sikhs are by their very nature entrepreneurial. They are hard workers. Wherever Sikhs have gone in the global diaspora, they've built a life. They've built a life for themselves, for their families. They've built commerce. They've built industry. They've been extremely productive. They have disproportionately contributed to every society that they've ended up in. It's just in their nature. It's actually one of the fundamental tenets of Sikhi, is to do honest work, to do selfless service, but to earn an honest living. And that is what drives Sikhs wherever they go in the world. We've seen it here in the UK. The Sikh community have been so entrepreneurial. They've created so much business and commerce. They have contributed as a result to British society. We see it right across North America, Canada. You've seen it, James. Wherever Sikhs go, they contribute positively in a disproportionately positive way to every society they end up in. I'll just also addend to that you're right, Indians are hard workers. It's not just Sikhs. Indians, wherever they go. Here in the UK, our Indian diaspora, as a generalisation, have been a massive contributor to British society, and I've always applauded and always felt a warm feeling towards our Indian community here in the UK. They've been a massive contributor to British society. So again, whilst I specifically will pick out the Sikh community who've been disproportionately positive, the Indians as a whole have been great contributors to all societies that they have ended up in. James.
Just that I totally agree with you, Angus, and here in Canada, it's no different.
Absolutely. So it's a very positive word for all Indians right across the world. Sandy Munro, Gautam Media is telling us that US aid has been used to destabilise Modi government. Well, yes, absolutely. Gautam propaganda is saying this money that's been sent to India has actually been used to undermine the Modi government, when in fact what you're saying is actually been used by the Modi government to suppress the opposition and promote and fund the IT cells. I think that's probably more the case, James.
Yeah, and I mean, right now there's so much misinformation coming out about what's being used or what money's being used where out of the USA budget that it's very murky right now. Angus will have to wait and see until some actual responsible reports come out from the reviews.
Yeah, and this is actually a great and a wonderfully provocative comment. Trump should send a message to free all political prisoners, particularly Sikhs, absolutely should. But what you're suggesting is that the US should open Khalsa schools and Sikh schools across India, but particularly across northwest India, in JK, Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan, to spread Sikhism. It will be a real test of Indian democratic values. It will also send a very loud message. Yeah, I think this is interesting, James. I think if the US funded the establishment of Sikh schools right across, particularly northwestern India, how would the Indian government react? It's a perfectly normal democratic thing to do in any nation. Here in the West, we have schools promoting religions of all sorts. So it'd be interesting if we did that in return to India. How would India react to that, James? I think we can predict.
Absolutely, and we have Khalsa schools and that here in Canada and other religious schools. But again, I think that if we revert back to the previous message about U.S. aid money being stripped away, I don't see the U.S. spending the money to open the schools. But yes, I love the concept.
Absolutely. Well, let's hope that we can push that somebody takes the lead in actually opening more Khalsa schools across northwest India. It'd be a very interesting experiment. And Pritam Korman says, Sikhs went wherever the British Army went. Oh yes, this is the note about Malaysia. When I said, we talked about Malaysia, James, and the new senator in Canada, who actually was born in Malaysia, and we said, we discovered that there was 100,000 Sikhs who live in Malaysia. And Pritam, of course, says the Sikhs were in the military, police, legal, medical, education field in Malaysia. Well, as we said, James, yes, absolutely, wherever Sikhs go, they always, through their selfless service towards the society that they live in, they have found places, senior places, right across, whether it's the military, the police, the legal professions, etc., etc. And as Pritam says, rightly so, yeah, wherever the British Army went, of course, the British Army contained a very strong, very powerful, very noble element of Sikhs within the British Army. And of course, they found themselves indeed in Malaysia.
Exactly. And it's just showing their depth and the reach. And just for our viewers out there, I belong to a lot of Facebook groups that are all around the world with the Sikh community. So by all means, let us know in our comment section if you are finding us in the Malaysian Sikh community on Facebook, or where you're getting where you're finding us from. We'd love to know that.
Absolutely. Please do let us know where you're from. Of course, we do know we have a very large following across North America. But if you're from different countries, we know we've got people in France watching, and Denmark, I think, came up as well. But let us know if you're from, let's say, the more unusual, non-English speaking countries. Let us know where you're from. Amar Khaira, thank you for this wonderful comment. You've highlighted this old documentary film from 1993, Behind the Barricade. Now, you sent the link from this. I would suggest, if you're interested in this, go follow this link of Amar Khaira, who's posted this up. It gives a clear history of the struggles in the Punjab with interviews of eyewitnesses at the time of police brutality, extrajudicial killings. It's fascinating to see a documentary made around the time of Jaswant Singh Kalra, Shahid Kalra's time. I've managed to get halfway through this. I haven't had time to see the whole documentary. I got halfway through this. It is a fascinating documentary. If you've any interest at all in seeing images of the Punjab in the late 1980s, watch this documentary. It's just beautiful, fabulous images, but it also interviews people. This is right in the thick of the extrajudicial killings in the 1980s and 1990s. It's interviewing ordinary Punjabis, Sikhs, who have directly suffered from this. They're telling them how relatives of theirs were taken out and disappeared, who vanished, basically murdered. It's just an incredible, real-time snapshot of what was happening at that time. As I say, I'm only halfway through, and I'm just getting into the really nasty part now. It's gripping stuff, I have to say. It turns out I didn't realise this. In 1986, I was in the Punjab, in Lahore, on the Pakistan side. I was travelling around that area. I met so many of these people at the time, I didn't realise was, stupidly at the time, as a young man, I didn't know what had happened in 1984. To my deepest regret, I didn't know. I tried to get to the Golden Temple at the time. I couldn't because the border was closed, of course, at that time. But all I would say is watch this documentary. Go have a look under the good, the bad video. The link is under Amakaira's comment. Watch that video. It's absolutely fascinating. It's only had 300 views. It's a shame. But do watch that if you want to get a real sense of flavour of what it was like at that time. It's quite moving, I have to say. So do watch that. James, I suggest you watch that one as well. It's fascinating.
Absolutely. I made a note here to myself about it. So yeah, I definitely will be checking it out.
And the final comment from Jatinder Lamba. Thanks, Angus and James. Well, thank you for your wonderful comment. You both carry an amazing energy. Right word would be fully loaded. Keep up the good work. Well, James, every day I feel fully loaded. Do you feel fully loaded?
Fully loaded and ready to go.
Absolutely. So thank you for that wonderful message of support. Indeed, we come every day fully loaded with hopefully what we hope is the truth and of course the counter narrative to the Indian Gautam media and of course spreading the good word of Khalistan. That's what we're here for. But unfortunately, we must, although we're fully loaded, unfortunately we must unload today's episode because we have reached the end of another show for the day. Please don't forget to keep your comments coming in. We do appreciate them. We do read every single one and they're always fascinatingly educational. And we do, of course, enjoy the critical ones as well, so keep those coming in as well, or correcting us if we get anything wrong. But in the meantime, don't forget you can also message us directly at message@satloadstv.com if there's anything you'd like to bring to our attention directly. But that is it for another day. It is a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.